Most people spend their entire lives trying to become rich. Steve Aoki was born into it. His father built one of the most successful restaurant empires in America. Steve could have inherited the money, the comfort, the security. Instead, he chose a mattress on the floor of a tiny basement. No heating, almost no money, no guarantee that any of it would work. Just music. And a dream that almost everyone around him believed was a mistake. This is the untold story of Steve Aoki, the man who walked away from a fortune to build one of his own. Newport Beach, California, 1977. Steve Aoki grows up in one of America's most successful entrepreneurial families. His father, Rocky Aoki, founded Benihana, a restaurant chain that became famous around the world. Rocky built his empire from almost nothing. His story became the definition of the American dream. From the outside, Steve's future seemed obvious. A successful family, business connections, financial security, a life most people could only dream about. But Steve wanted something completely different. He wasn't interested in boardrooms. He wasn't interested in business meetings. He was drawn toward loud music, underground clubs, punk rock, the kind of places where nobody cared who your father was. As a teenager, he became obsessed with music, not because it promised money, but because it made him feel alive. Then came the decision that shocked everyone. Instead of joining the family business, Steve walked away from comfort, away from certainty, away from the future everyone expected him to choose. He moved into a tiny basement, concrete floors, bare walls, almost no heating. There were days when money was so tight that every dollar mattered. Friends questioned his decision. Family members couldn't understand it. Why would anyone leave a life of comfort for a future with no guarantees? But Steve believed something that would define the rest of his life. If he succeeded, he wanted it to be because he earned it, not because it had been handed to him. Inside that basement, Steve started a small independent record label. He called it Dim Mak, named after the legendary martial arts technique known as the touch of death. There were no investors, no big offices, no famous artists waiting to sign. Just one young man, working day and night, trying to build something people believed would never survive. For years, Dim Mak barely made enough money to stay alive. Steve organized underground shows, released records for unknown artists, drove equipment himself, did whatever was necessary to keep the dream alive. Many people assumed it was only a matter of time before he gave up. He never did. Slowly, artist by artist, show by show, Dim Mak became one of the most respected independent labels in electronic music. Then came the moment that changed Steve Aoki forever. During one of his live performances, he picked up a cake and launched it into the crowd. The audience exploded with excitement. People laughed, screamed, cheered. In that moment, Steve realized something. People weren't coming just to hear music. They wanted an experience, something unforgettable. From that night forward, every Steve Aoki show became complete chaos. Crowd surfing, champagne showers, inflatable rafts floating across thousands of fans, and of course, cakes flying through the air. He wasn't just performing. He was creating memories people would talk about for years. When electronic music exploded around the world in the early 2000s, Steve Aoki was ready. Years of struggle had prepared him for the moment. Collaborations followed with artists across every genre. Linkin Park, BTS, Louis Tomlinson, Backstreet Boys, Will.i.am, Machine Gun Kelly. He never believed music should have boundaries, only possibilities. But perhaps the most surprising chapter of Steve Aoki's life had nothing to do with music. Away from the stage, he developed a deep passion for science, especially neuroscience, longevity, and the future of human health. Through the Aoki Foundation, he began supporting research into brain science and regenerative medicine. The same curiosity that once pushed him to build a record label from a basement was now pushing him to explore some of humanity's biggest questions. How can people live healthier lives? How can science change our future? And what kind of legacy truly matters? Today, Steve Aoki is one of the most recognizable performers in electronic music. Millions of fans, sold-out festivals, a global brand built entirely on his own terms. But perhaps his greatest achievement isn't the music. It isn't the success. It isn't even the fortune he built. It's this. Most people inherit wealth. Steve Aoki inherited courage. The courage to risk everything, to leave certainty behind, to build something with his own hands, so that one day, people wouldn't simply remember him as Rocky Aoki's son. They would remember Rocky as Steve Aoki's father. From a freezing basement to the biggest stages on earth, from walking away from an empire to creating one of his own. That is the Steve Aoki story. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more untold stories behind the legends who changed music forever. The next story might surprise you even more.